Well, hello and welcome to our second description about how to use the Kansas State Budget Generator. This is the second in a multi-part series about how to actually use the tool. I would encourage you, if you haven't seen the first one yet about the general overview, to go ahead and watch that one first, and then come back to this one. And this one I'll be talking about how you would make changes to an existing crop budget. And again, all of our printed budgets that we have showing up on our agmanager.info website would already be in the as part of this budgeting tool. So again, I would figure most folks would use this as taking an existing crop budget and adjusting it to your local situation or adjusting it to a specific farmer's situation. So again, this is what we're going to be doing. How to make changes to a budget. Again, I want to remind everyone that funding for this tool was provided by USDA NIFA Organic Transition Grant. Again, the idea here is this tool can also be used to help develop organic crop budgets too. All right, well, let's start out and look at some of the existing crop budgets and how you might go about and change those for your specific situation. So I'll just start off with this corn budget here in north central Kansas. And we'll talk about making some changes to that. So I'm assuming that you probably don't want to really adjust any of the header information that you see showing up here. What you might want to adjust, though, is maybe the fuel price. If you do that, you just come over here and you can click. Let's say we put in $2 for the diesel fuel price. That will automatically then adjust the fuel price. You can tell that by looking at on the input side over here. Well, actually, on the machinery side, look at our this first one, this fertilizer thing. Right now, with the price of $2 per gallon, here's our fuel cost, 82 cents per acre. If we go back and change this to $1.75 and go back and look at the machinery, now notice here it changed from 72, or it changed to 72 from 82, so it was a 10-cent per acre reduction. Again, this is obviously not a heavy use of fuel, putting fertilizer on with the spin spreader, so not a whole lot of fuel costs there. But that's the way you would go about making the fuel price differences, how it would show up in the machinery and such as you go through a budget. All right, and again, the irrigation, that's going to show up. This is the price of natural gas. This will show up in any kind of irrigation cost. Then let's look at the product. This is where the outputs come in. So you could have more than one output for a particular crop. And in the case where that would probably show up most is looking at a cotton budget, where we would have both income from both the cotton lint and also for the cotton seed. And you can really combine both these here in one page. It allows for that. If you were doing, maybe another situation of combining maybe a double cropping situation, you wanted to have everything in one particular budget like this, you could do that as well here. So there is some flexibility for having multiple products in your output side here. So again, if you want to make a change to this, I'm assuming if you're going to modify a corn budget, you're going to stay with corn, and probably the same with the region too. But it's very easy to change the quantity sold. So again, the back-end database for this corn product that we've kind of determined from earlier last year, that we determined this was kind of the average yield for corn in north central Kansas. So that's already kind of built in. So whenever you select corn, you're going to get this default yield. Well, if you think your yield is higher than that, it's easy to change that by selecting that and then keying in a new bushels per acre. And you notice here, as soon as you do that, then the amount increases, because this is a calculated field. It's just basically what the quantity sold times price is and gives you this. Again, you could actually change that again if you wanted to too. Same thing with the price. So right now it's $3.65. You want to change that, you could do that as well. One thing to keep in mind, though, if you do go back and reselect this again, so you just happen to come over here and re-click on this corn north central, if you do that now, it will kind of reload the default values back in, and we'll change that back to 120. So you're not really changing anything in the back-end database, but for this particular budget that you are working on, if you change the number here, it will show up with a changed number. So if I want to put like $4 in, it'll change that and calculate me a new gross dollars. But again, if you want to go back to what the original back-end database has for default, just go back over here, click on that. That will take you back to what you had originally in the first place. And then you can either delete or add a particular item here. If you make a mistake and decide you want to get rid of it, just click on the delete button and it will take that away. So if I want to put it back in, just go back to corn, north central Kansas, and we're back to where we were to start with again. All right, so that's how you change the product side of things. On the input side, again, a similar type process. You can either filter or show off. Again, if you want to just look at the herbicides, you hit like that. If you want to change this to just look at the fertilizers, you could do like that. Now we'll just show you the specific ones that you actually have for that category. But let's say you want to change from DAP to MAP. And when you do this, notice here, the choices you see here right here under the specific item, they are determined by what is happening over here in the category of input. So you're not going to see all the herbicides and insecticides when you have fertilizers selected. You're just going to see the particular one that you have. And again, make your choice here. If you want to change that to a different product, and again, you probably want to make sure you double click or click on this and select this again to make sure your numbers get converted back correctly. I noticed that is one thing that doesn't always quite work correctly. If you start changing things over here, you really need to make sure you get your units selected back to what it should have been to make sure everything recalculates correctly. So just kind of keep that in mind if you start changing around with these, is always kind of click on this converter thing again just to make sure that these numbers calculate correctly. All right, so again, that's how you make fertilizer changes. This ability to limit what you're seeing under the input used is really valuable when you get to like herbicides, because now even though you just have herbicides selected here, notice you want to make a change to that. We have a bunch of different herbicides. These come from our colleagues over in the agronomy side department, and they determine every year in that one publication they put out in January all the different herbicides and the different prices that go along with those. I use that information for the database part you see here. That's where all these different herbicides you see listed come from. They're all based on what the agronomy folks tell me for current herbicide prices. And you notice here there's also the unit that you would typically buy this in is showing up here too here. So notice a lot of these are in gallons. And then again, you're probably not going to use gallons when you think about applying that to your field here. So again, the converter for herbicides comes in especially handy because we can go from gallons to ounces to pounds, pints to quarts, so on and so forth. So again, it does the calculation and automatically then adjusts the price so it's in the correct unit that you want here. So as we go from gallons to ounce, notice here that it converted the price per gallon into a price per ounce. And now we're ready to go here through and put in the application rate, as you see here, and then the number of applications. So sometimes you may like for let's say Roundup, you may apply that in several different applications, and you can do that. You can put how much you apply each application, the number of application, and when it figures the total cost, it's basically taking the price per unit multiplied by the units per acre times the number of applications here. So this number of applications can have a big effect on what your total cost is. So if we would double our applications, we should double our cost, like you see there. So be careful of how you use that whether the application is being applied twice or not. All right, so that's all of our inputs that go along with it, how you would make changes. The machinery side, there's probably a little more complicated things to do there. So again, we have a section where you can either use custom rates or your own machinery. If you want to add something new, again, you could, like we've had in the past, you would basically select harvesting. Again, this region selector is kind of at a default because over here on the basic page, you see I selected my machinery region as Kansas. So it will automatically default to picking custom rates for Kansas. Now, in past years, our custom rates actually is for different areas of the state. I just use the overall Kansas number because there's a lot more values for the overall state number. And really the regional differences aren't that big a deal anyway. So I just have the Kansas numbers in here. You can look at a flat charge. You can also do the extra charge like we have typically used in the past if you want to go about looking at that way. The other machinery region would be Iowa. So Iowa really has a bigger custom rate survey than what we do here in Kansas. So I have their numbers in here available to use as well here. Again, it will probably give you a little different number than what Kansas had. But again, their survey is a little bigger and they have some extra categories of custom operations that we don't have. So if you don't see it in the Kansas side, go to the Iowa side, and there's a good chance it may be in there as well here. So let me go back to Kansas for harvesting. And let's just say you want to put in, you would maybe have a base rate for corn like that. And then you could also have the extra charge for harvesting like we have in old budgets from last year and the year before, where you would have an extra charge for corn per bushel here. Notice here, this is though, the extra charge though is keyed to what your yield is. So that's why this cost to yield turns to Y, because it's saying whenever I have corn yields above 77 bushels, now my extra charge is going to kick in, and I would calculate the cost that way. So for those of you who want to go back and look at budgets back in the old way where we use custom rates for everything, this would be the way to do it. You basically select your base harvesting rate, the extra charge for that, and you can still get kind of cost numbers like you had before. But since most producers in Kansas do own their own equipment, I think it was a good decision to actually look at what it would cost to actually have your own combine and corn header and apply it that way here. And you notice here it really doesn't change your overall cost so much here. So over here again, we kind of select the category. We have the machinery stuff though is a little different the way it goes about, because it first asks for either your implement or for the size of header you're talking about. So with harvesting, it's first going to ask you for a particular header size or a header type. So this is a corn head, and then we pick the size over here. Again, by picking things over here in the implement side and the implement type, it limits our choices right here, which is a good thing because the machinery database is pretty good size by itself as well here. So we're looking at basically an 8-row header, 30-inch rows. That's what we have picked. And then when we do that, then it automatically matches that up with an appropriate size combine. So I'm not sure what class a 250 to 300 horsepower combine would be, but again, it's automatically filled in from the choice we made with the grain head right there. And then some operations have additional labor attached to it, and if there is, they will automatically show up here. But you're free to go ahead and add additional labor, different types of labor if you want to as well. But again, that would not be the default. And then again, all these other numbers here should come into play here as well here. I just kind of show you as a point of reference here, when we changed over from custom rates to looking at own machinery here, it doesn't change things a whole lot. So this would be about $37.50 here with custom rates versus owning machinery is $36.50. So about $1 difference. So pretty close difference. And very small changes in most cases when you're looking at custom rates with owned machinery. The advantage is this actually reflects probably what most producers in Kansas do. And you also get, when you do the owned machinery, you get the breakdown for labor, fuel, repair and maintenance, and the fixed costs that you don't get up in the custom rate numbers. The only place I've really seen much of a difference between the custom rates and owned machinery is when it comes to spraying. Because if you can use your own self-propelled sprayer, if you have enough acres to do that, your cost per acre gets pretty low. The caveat there, though, is that owning your own machine or owning your own self-propelled sprayer, you got to cover a lot of acres to get the cost that low. So keep that in mind as we assume that you're getting full use out of your equipment when you have owned equipment here. If you're a farmer where you don't have quite enough acres to do that, then your cost per acre should probably be adjusted upward. And again, you can manually adjust these dollars here if you want to. So this is what we have then for the cost for machinery cost, and I'll get rid of these so I don't screw up my budgets. I'll go ahead and take these out like I had before. And now I just really have a custom operation for our anhydrous, because there is really no owned ownership for the anhydrous spreader here, so I had to come up to the custom rate here. But these two will combine together, and then on your budget you'll have a separate printout for or separate line item for custom rates, and then separate ones for the owned machinery stuff. All right, I'll come back and talk about irrigation here when we get to an irrigation budget. The other things to do to keep in mind here too is this budget combo here. So this is important, and when you're printing out a budget, is you need to have a budget matched up with what you're working on here. And I'll show you when I get to the irrigation ones how that comes into play. But at a bare minimum, you need to have over here the budget selected in this box over here as the one you're working on. So you see right down here, this is list all your budgets, and you want to make sure that this budget is showing up over here. Probably the The biggest mistake I think will happen is if you go ahead and develop a new budget, you will forget to select that particular budget that will be included for printing. And the way that you can test for that, and you'll know for sure that happens, is if you look at the final printout you get, you'll notice that you just get a blank header and footer with nothing in between. So the first thing to do if you see something like that is come to this page and make sure you do have a budget showing up for printing actually in this. And then we get to our reports page where you can actually print these things out. And again, kind of like what I talked about in the very first video description here. But let me look at one of the irrigated budgets to show you how that would come into play with the combination thing. So notice here, with the irrigated corn budget, notice there's nothing here under the irrigation side. Where the irrigation side comes in, there's actually a separate sub-budget for irrigation stuff, where you see like Central Kansas irrigation. This is like a separate budget. The only thing that's in this particular budget is this part for irrigation. These three parts here, the center pivot, the power unit, and the well pump and gear head that goes along with that. So there's a separate budget just for that. When you get to a crop now that actually employs irrigation, this is where the combination thing is going to show up. So what you really have together is you have your basic corn thing, which has all the inputs, it has the outputs, it has the machinery use, will all show up in this very first 151 budget. It's combining that then with this irrigation part of the budget, which just has the irrigation parts. And it's a real quick and slick way for me to, and for you guys too, to combine two things together to get a irrigated crop budget that's really just consists of two parts. We could do the same thing with like wheat and double crop soybeans and basically just develop our soybean budget, and then we can come back and add the wheat budget. And by selecting the budget combo here, we will get that combination wheat double crop soybeans as a separate enterprise unit if we want to here. But currently for all the budgets I have in our database right now, I'm just using the budget combos to put a crop budget together in combination with an irrigated budget together, and that gives me everything I need for an irrigated corn budget then. All right, well, that's how you would kind of work with a current budget to make changes, which I think was what most folks will probably want to do. They'll probably want to start with their current budgets and then adjust it accordingly. So that'll be the end of this particular description of the video description of how the budgets work. The next one coming up, we'll be talking about developing a budget from scratch.